I'm your host, John Keene. As always, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. I ask that you please add, follow, check us out. Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter or X, The Real Best Damn. And wherever you catch this one from, make sure to subscribe, follow, give us a like, and hit the thumbs up, and share the link. Way to support my work, support the channel is by sharing. It helps new people to find me, helps me to get the message out there. And if you would like to donate and support to the channel, you can do so by going to PayPal, Cash App, Facebook Messenger. All the links are in the description and also in the chat, and they'll be pinned at the top of the comment section. Tonight I've got a pretty special message, I guess. One that I don't know if I'll be able to get out in like one video, but one that's kind of like been on my heart for quite a while to share, and just to kind of like give you, kind of like set the stage a little bit and like give you a little bit of, background on everything. Some of you that will see this video have maybe watched me for years. Some of you guys maybe just have found me. But over probably the last 7-8 years or so, as part of like, creating content, as you know, I do a lot of, religious and spiritual content as well as conspiracies, and as a result of that, we do lots of deep dives, into some pretty dark stuff, and it's like, I've seen a transformation not only within myself, and I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've done and experienced and that has happened and has really caused a drastic change in my belief system from point A to point Z to where we are now, and kind of brought me back again to where I originally started. And it's kind of like a crazy journey. And I've done some stuff I'm not very proud of, participated in some things I'm not very proud of. But I think the only way that I can like really kind of balance the scales, I guess, is by sharing it with people and letting them know, the dangers of experimenting with different schools of thought and different methods of spirituality and different practices. So, and it's like, first and foremost, I want to ask you, when you look at the world today, and I think it's very evident, but when we look at the world today, and you guys will have to excuse me, I'm outside. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a busy city, so hopefully it's not too loud. But when you look at the world today, and you look at our politicians, the government, you look at the religious leaders, you look at sports icons, celebrities, popular influencers, so on and so forth, right? And then you look at like the state of, most people in relationships and how common, divorce is and just all of these things, terrible parenting, low moral values, just all of it, right? It makes one wonder, what has happened to us as a species, what has happened to us that has drug us down in such a way, that we see a reflection of our spiritual sickness, and when you look at TV, you look at the media, you look at politicians, you look at all of these things, it's real easy to sit back and judge. It's real easy to say, oh, well, these crooked politicians and all of this is corrupt. They're trying to bring us into a new world order. And, look at the satanic agenda and look at the predictive programming, look at the symbolism and look at all the corruption, right? Look at all the deception. But I think it's real easy for us to pass the buck, when it comes to this and like, blame everything outside of ourselves and blame everyone outside of ourselves for the state of the world and the state of humanity and the state of our species and, kind of the condition that we're in. But I think what we're honestly seeing is a reflection of all of us collectively as a whole, spiritually. You know, when you look into like the zeitgeist and you look on the media and you look at all this, you see a bunch of spiritually sick people, right? People without morals, people without values, people that are corrupt to the fucking core, right? Corrupt to the bone. And the reason I think this is, and you know, a lot of the reason I think this is because we are approaching the end of the age, you know, and not to get, you know, super religious or anything like that, but if you look at every religion on the face of the earth, right, they all have some variation or some version that speaks to the end times, the last days, the different yugas and different cycles. And they always culminate in some grandiose ending, right? And it's usually cataclysmic, catastrophic even, right? And as we end and we increase in knowledge, we increase in awareness, we consciously increase, it appears as if humanity, and it's like, I don't know if this is because there was some sort of genetic alteration by the gods, right? These fallen angels that, you know, allegedly came unto the daughters of men and mated with women and procreated. And we see this in the fossil records when we look at like Neanderthal to Cro-Magnus, right? We see at one point we were more ape-like with thick-ass skulls, flat teeth, meaning we only ate plants. We were very, solo creatures, right? Almost hermetic in a sense, right? We stayed to ourselves except our mates. And it appears as if we didn't really have that divine spark within us at that time. And then all of a sudden, you know, Cro-Magnus comes along and we become these social creatures, right? Where we are kicking it in groups and, you know, we're building civilization. We're making fucking paintings and, you know, we're expressing ourselves in art and music and just all of these, you know, fantastic ways that kind of show, you know, that divine spark within us, you know? And as this change happens, you know, I think like for me, for, you know, my thoughts, for what it's worth, you know, I believe that this was when the injection of, you know, the serpent seed or whatever you want to call it was placed in us, you know, and it's like every single religion on the face of the earth also has tales of, you know, a great deluge or, you know, biblical floods, you know, and within those epics, you know, we see that there was great destruction, right? Great destruction. And we look into the Bible and it says that there was nothing new under the sun, right? Meaning everything gets a return. You know, we're literally going in circles here. And I believe the reason is because we have some sort of training wheels on down here. And, you know, I'm going to get to the point here in a moment, but I just want to kind of paint the picture here. We have some sort of training wheels on as a species. You know, if you believe in the Bible and what it says about the earth, it says we have a firmament. You know, that this place is created. You know, this ain't a natural planet out in space like we've been fed by, you know, NASA and, you know, mainstream science, right? According to, you know, biblical accounts and a lot of other historical accounts as well. You know, I'm not telling you the earth is flat. I don't fucking know what shape it is. But I am saying it appears to be a construct that was created by whatever or whoever made us. And by whatever and whoever made us appears to have interjected and injected their seed into us to alter us and speed us along, speed us up along when it comes to like how we progressed consciously. And in some ways it set us back, right? With the alteration of our telomeres, which shortened our lifespan, you know, only allowing us to use 10% of our brain at one time. I believe at one point in time we had the abilities of telepathy and all of this, and it feels like we had too much power. So these deities or gods or creators decided, hey, we need to turn them down a notch because they're too dangerous. And if you look at the gods, you know, they war, they sleep with a bunch of people, right? They have jealousy, they have anger. It's like we're just like them, right? When we're made in the image of the Elohim, we truly are made in the image of the Elohim. You know, and I say that to say this, you know, one thing that I feel like is glorified quite a bit, you know, especially in spiritual circles, conspiracy circles, you know, whatever, is the New Age beliefs, right? The New Age beliefs, you know. And in the Bible, they call this the depths of Satan. The depths of Satan. And it's serpent knowledge. I'm going to tell you why, too. So as some of you know, I started off really a Christian fundamentalist, you know, when all of this began for me back in 2015-ish, somewhere back in there. I started off a Christian fundamentalist. And, you know, very firm believer in, you know, the whole Jesus thing, Christianity, you know, all of it. But as I explored more, you know, and as I learned more about spirituality, I began to like dabble in other things. You know, I began to look into other things. A lot of you guys will remember I've done deep dives on probably every spiritual text, you know, under the sun, literally, you know. And I even started to buy in, and this is what's crazy about it, you know. And it talks about in the Bible, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm doing this on my phone, so I don't have my books and stuff right next to me. But, you know, it talks about those that, like the innocent ones that are like children in the Bible, those who haven't known the depths of Satan, right? The serpent knowledge that I'm talking about, right? And I say that to say this because once you have experienced and once you have experienced the depths of the occult, once you have experienced that knowledge, right, it does something to you. You know, see, you know, this gnosis or knowledge that we have been given, and, you know, I don't care what form you're practicing, I can tell you all roads lead to Rome when it comes to this shit. And this is one thing that, you know, in this polytheism and all this, I can, and I'm going to try to help you see how, you know, and as I've done all of this content and shared all of these things, you know, what I would continuously find is that over and over and over and over again, each and every one of these religions were all talking about the same deities, right? The same gods, okay? Which was the 7 main planets, which represent the 7 days of the week, which represent the 7 chakras, the 7 colors of the rainbow, right? And that's why we hear that 7 is the number of God, right? And that all of these deities, and if you keep in mind too, what these planets actually mean, if you look at the translation for the word planet, it means a wandering star, right? A wandering star. Now, to kind of give you a little bit more scope of how things work, you know, the Lord of Hosts, or God, the Creator, the Heavenly Father, He is the Lord of Hosts. The heavenly hosts are the stars, right? Or the luminaries. Those are the Elohim, right? Meaning the angels, the watchers. They're the ones that just watch, right? They don't participate. They just look. They are conscious entities, in my opinion. That's why when you look into astrology and things of that nature, you will find that each one of them have archetypical energies, and they have masculine and feminine sides, you know, dominant traits, and you know, they have different elements to them and different powers, and they influence over certain things. And even so, you know, even the study of astrology is essentially, you know, whenever you're born or conceived, the astrological influence that is present in the heavens when you come into this earth is the algorithm of energies that you are made up of, right? Hope that makes sense, right? And it goes into it goes way deeper than that too. We can look in numerology, and you can add up the numbers of your birth, and the mantra, which is your name. All of these things make up the algorithm of who you are. There is a formula, right, for your physical vessel. Okay. And it is influenced by the principalities, powers, and dominions. That's why he says we wrestle not against flesh, but against principalities, powers, and dominions. In the Geneva Bible, in the original translation, it says in the dark rulers of this world as well. So, they took that out with King James. Everybody believes that King James is like the most purest Bible, but it's not even close. If you have any access to older Bibles than that, you'll see that there is quite a bit that has been taken out or altered in such a way, especially in any type of anti-government sentiments, which, they were monarchs back then, but they believed they ruled by divine right. This rulership by divine right, they believe, came because they were the children or the offspring of the Nephilim, right? And the fall, which means fallen or giants, depending on what you look at, the variation of what you look at from Hebrew or Aramaic, right? It means the fallen or the giants, right? And they believe they descended from this. Now, when they were in the world, if you look at the story of Enoch, which is not in the canon of the Bible, unless you look at the Ethiopic Bible, right? It's considered an apocryphal text, right? The book of Enoch. And there are, I believe, 3 books of Enoch. And Enoch number 1 is probably, and a lot of people would agree with me on this, Enoch number 1 is probably the most valid and truest, purest version of Enoch. You start to get in Enoch 2 and 3, and what you see is that Enoch has kind of been, there's been a switcheroo pulled on all of us, and Enoch appears to be Hermes or something like that, right? He's not the same guy, he's not the same guy. Enoch, he goes to God on behalf of these 200 watchers. And if you remember, these watchers, they came down to earth and they mated with women, having the Nephilim, which were giants. And these giants were fucked up, right? They were trash, man. They were just bad dudes. They devoured everything on the earth. They committed sins against animals, atrocities against nature, and atrocities against human beings. And they started to devour us and eat us, right, for our blood. And that's why the Bible talks about us not to consume blood, because, the blood is the life. And think about, Jesus Christ and how it talks about he shed our blood for our sins and all of this. So the blood is the life. And this is where you get into the adrenochrome and all of this when we look at, elites and SRA and rituals and all of that. The reason that they are devouring, consuming, for one, whenever they perform these rituals, blood, because of the essence it has in it, in a spiritual sense, allows entities to manifest into this reality, right? So if they are summoning demons or entities, I'm going to tell you how I know all this stuff here in a moment. We're going to get to it. They allow demonic entities, deities, demigods, elementals, etc., the ability. It's almost like a light, right? These things are trapped in darkness. These are the demons are the souls of the Nephilim, right? Because when the flood came, the world got so damn corrupt, right? It got so corrupt that these Nephilim, these giants, they were devouring men. They were eating them, drinking their blood. And then they started devouring each other, eating each other, drinking each other's blood, right? That, Enoch went on behalf of these 200 watchers, is what they said the number was, who taught men and women the arts of witchcraft, the studies of astrology, makeup, how to paint our eyes, jewelry, just all of these different, dark arts, if you will, right? They taught them witchcraft and magic, and these were This was forbidden knowledge. That's why it's called occulted, meaning it's hidden, right? Or hermetic, meaning it's sealed, right? So they taught all this knowledge, had these monsters of an offspring, right? Because they wanted the earth to be subdued by them, not man, right? So they wanted their seed to rule the earth instead of us, you know? And because of this, the angels came to God and they said, to the Lord of hosts, they said, like, why are you allowing this crap to go on? Like, can't you hear the cries and the screams of man? They're pleading, down there for help because we were just being conquered, overran, enslaved by these entities, They had brought evil into the world on a level that we couldn't even imagine. I believe this was probably Atlantis, just to be honest, And when we look at like all the monoliths and megalithic structures all across the earth, I think it's very evident. And if you ask any of, the ancient cultures and things like that, they all say that the gods built these structures, that we didn't do it, right? That's where the whole ancient astronaut, ancient alien theory came from, And every one of them say that it was the gods that built these structures. And these structures, they're built out of marble and just all these incredible, stones. And this is where, masonry and all this ends up coming out of, right? And they are aligned with celestial bodies, right? Astrological bodies to harness the energy of these stars. They connect with it. They're on the ley lines or the energy grid of the earth to harness the earth grid and earth energy, right? And they are in particular shapes, like the four-sided pyramid, which is like the perfect conduit for ferrofluid fluid or magnetic properties, right? So they're conduits of energy is what they are. And they probably served many, many purposes. Like many people believe, the Great Pyramid served as a temple of initiation, and that, those from Greece and, all of them, ancient cultures used to travel to Egypt to learn the mysteries, right? And that within the pyramid, that's where they would go. They would lay in a coffin or a sarcophagus for 3 days, right? And they would be raised, like in Freemasonry, brought back, reborn, if you will, into the gnosis or into the knowledge, right? The hidden knowledge and the mysteries. And this was by divine right. These were, the powerful people, of the world, the powerful bloodlines of the world. Even back then, they still had, this divine right thing to believe that they had the right to be illuminated, to rule over all of us, even after the gods, and you look at like Sumerian kings list and all of this, there were gods ruling over the earth and dynasties for tens of thousands of years. There's no human living that long, and the humans with that seed in them began to live 800, 1,000 years or whatever until, God said that, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, and then shortened our years to 120 years, and that's where you look at like the telomere effect, where it appears as if our telomeres have been soldered or altered, not allowing us to regenerate or extend past 120 years, right? So the great flood was brought, and there was destruction brought onto the earth because of this knowledge, because he had, brought so much destruction, This is where people in modern day, the whole blood rituals, like I said, there's power in the blood, and that's why they, want the blood of the youth, because it literally makes them younger. When you look at like stem cells and different injections, they're using like foreskin of babies. They're using lots of parts of things, from the A word, which I don't want to say that here on YouTube, but it's to unalive in the belly there. They use that spare stuff as part of this. And if you know, there's a lot of satanic high priests that actually are allowed in after the fact or during the fact of that procedure, because that whenever you petition to Satan, um, and petition to demons, I'm going to talk about this in a moment. We're going to get deep here. Whenever you petition to Satan or you petition to demons, right? The higher the atrocity against God, which is against humanity in essence, the higher the atrocity, the higher the abomination, right? Like the destruction of innocence, of an innocent life, the more powerful it is to Satan, right? So when they do those procedures, they get the red stuff. I'm trying to be careful what I say here, on their hands, right? As they do that procedure, and they immediately go and petition to Satan for whatever they're asking for, right? But that innocent life is what pays, pays for what they're asking for, because there's always an exchange of energy, right? There's always an exchange of energy, and this is in witchcraft. We see, like, and if you look at nature, guys, I mean this, like, look at nature. Everything on the earth is naturally in balance with itself and with the planet, right? Like birds, fish, insects, animals, even reptiles, which they devour their own young. So that tells you something about the serpent and reptiles and that cold-blooded nature, and what it is. But everything is within balance, right? It's except us, right? And the reason being is because we have that divinity within ourselves. We have that divine spark within ourselves. So, in order for us to be within our natural habitat, if you will, we have to be connected to God. We have to be connected to the Spirit. That's what actually charges us. That's our original home. That's our original space and our original place, right? So when we disconnect ourselves from that, we disconnect ourselves from the source, we have a lack of power. We've unplugged from life, literally. We've unplugged from our blessings, our abundance, prosperity, healing, all of it. We've unplugged. So when you are unplugged, you become parasitic by nature. And that's why you see a culture and society of a bunch of narcissistic, parasitic people. They're all unplugged, if you will, and not in a good way, like in the Matrix. They're unplugged from God. They're unplugged from the source, right? So they become consumers, to where they're trying to fill that void. They're trying to fill that hole. So they try to fill it with things, with money, with sex, with drugs, right? They use people. They abuse people. They lie. They do all of these different things because they're constantly needing to use other people's energy, others' energy, and other sources to fill them up with that life that they're missing, right? To fill that void of what they're missing, And sadly, I would say 90% of the world or more is in that condition, right? We are in that condition, And those that practice the darkest, the deepest, darkest depths of the occult. So when you sell your soul, and I'm not going to tell you all of it because I don't want people that watch this to try and go do it or anything like that. But part of the pact, if you will, that you write is, the blood of Jesus covers sins, but not mine, right? In Jesus, there is redemption, but not for me, right? You're like writing these things out, right? And making these declarations that you are separate from God. And that not only are you separate from God, but there is no redemption for you, right? That Jesus and his blood, and remember the blood being the life, right, doesn't have the effect on you that it has on everybody else. There is no forgiveness for you. So you are disconnected from the source. So everything that you do in the spiritual, everything that you do in the spiritual costs. It has a price, right? That's why you see so many people so intent on leading others astray, right? That's part of the price, right? And it's part of the price. You know that you're trying to build rank, if you will, in hell. The idea is that hell isn't it isn't torture and pain. It's like a giant party, a giant orgy. All the things that we consider sin and really screwed up things here, and we consider to be the lowest of the low here, is going on there, right? And it's like when you go to hell with that belief, it's saying like, oh, well, I'm finally free, right? I'm finally free to party and have sex and do all the things that I've always wanted to do, unchained, unhindered, right? But it's a false concept because it's not true at all. There's many accounts of people that have died and experienced hell, right? And whether you believe or not, I can tell you that the elites of the world believe that serious occultists and satanic priests believe. I can tell you that the most powerful people on the earth believe, right? Whether you do or not, they do. And believe it with their whole heart, right? And I believe, that it's nothing like what we're told when we're in that mindset, that it actually is torture, right? It's a deception. Remember, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. He was a liar from the beginning. He was a liar from the beginning. And he told us that if we ate from that tree of knowledge, that surely we won't die. And that same lie is being perpetuated today. That's what the occult is. That's what witchcraft is, It's that forbidden fruit, It's that forbidden fruit. It's being initiated into the world of darkness, It's being initiated into that. And through that initiation, we take on spiritual death, And what the belief is, and a lot of schools of thought believe, like, you need to experience the darkness to find the light. And I've fallen for all of this. I've believed all of this. I've done the rituals. I've practiced black magic. I did all of it, and things I'm not proud of at all. Things I would never want my children or people I care about to ever do or even know. Like I've been so ashamed of the things I've done and the things I've been a part of and participated in. Like it's just been really hard for me to even come to terms with it, just to be honest. Like how could someone fall so far? Someone falls so far, and it happens. It's not all at once. It's a gradual thing. It's really gradual. It's not just like you wake up one day and you start practicing New Age or, studying the occult or witchcraft and all that, and all of a sudden you're a devil worshiper. It doesn't doesn't work like that. It's bit by bit by bit, you know? And the moment you're exposed to it is the moment it starts to have an effect on you. And that's the craziest part. Because, like, once you know, you can't unknow. And it's designed, all of it, you know, is designed to give you a perverse way of looking at the world, a perverse way of looking at God, a perverse way of looking at things and yourself in general, right? It creates a monster, you know, and you think about Nietzsche, what he said, he that fights monsters better take care that, or make sure that he doesn't become one himself, because when we stare into the abyss, it stares back into us, right? I believe he is talking about the darkness of the occult, the depths of Satan's urban knowledge when he's speaking, you know, because a lot of us start off like that, you know, like we start off trying to learn the truth. We start off maybe even trying to expose the shit, you know. We start off with the intent of becoming enlightened, of raising our consciousness, raising our vibration. We have like, oh, you know, and remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, you know. But it's poison, you know, it's poison. Because bit by bit, it starts to sink you deeper and deeper into a hole you can't dig out of, you know. And I remember probably when I first started with it, it was incredibly innocent, you know. It was me trying to understand the things that were happening to me, you know. I was experiencing extremely heavy paranormal activity. I had, you know, because of I was creating content and the influence and all that, I was being attacked, you know, spiritual warfare. So I wanted to understand how it all worked. I wanted to, you know the mechanisms of what made it effective and what allowed it to be effective against me, you know. And that's how it started. You know, I can tell you this, like, once you start to know, it becomes more and more tempting, you know, to use it yourself, right? To defend yourself against others that are doing it. But each time that we open ourselves up to those things, and like this goes for, and people aren't gonna like this, but this goes for tarot, astrology, all of it, you know. There is a spirit that rules each and every one of those things, you know. And we participate in these things, and when we do these things, we open ourselves up to those spirits. We're giving reverence and energy and focus to those spirits. And those spirits are small cookies compared to a lot of the others, you know. And we start to take on the characteristics of these spirits too. It's a parasite, you know. It's like those that, you know, practice with the blood rituals and stuff. When the first time you participate in one of these rituals, you're going to throw up. You know, you're going to get sick. We're not meant to consume blood, you know. So when we do that, a lot of times, you know, it makes people instantly, they're heaving, they're having a bad time. They're very sick from it, you know. But if you persist in that, and those who have the bloodline, so some are born with the bloodline, and those who have that bloodline have that parasite lying dormant within them, right? So the rituals activate that parasite within you, right? That demonic parasite. that activates that parasite within you. And when it does, and I don't know any scientific evidence to back this up, so, but I have seen and witnessed this myself. I know it's real. I know it's true. And you can also be kind of, you can be brought in other ways as well by consuming the blood of someone who does have that divine bloodline, right? So hypothetically say I have the bloodline within me. I sell my soul and I join a cult, and I perform the initiation ritual and I consume the blood, right? Now I'm activated, I'm activated. And what it does when you begin to be activated is it changes your system. You metabolize things differently. Instead of the blood making you sick, the more you consume it, it begins to bring vitality to you, right? Just like all those, elites and shit like that. And I hate the term elite, but I just don't have a better one for you right now. But all those celebrities and all of that are using baby's foreskin and, the adrenochrome and all of that, their body metabolizes that in a way that brings them youth, that brings them vitality. You will literally see people have physical transformation when they're participating in these things. I shit you not. You'll see somebody go from looking pale or gray and ragged and wrinkled to once they consume or participate, they're all of a sudden, their skin's flushed and cherry looking, and, they have light in their eyes and all of that because, they've ingested that. And they believe also that when they sacrifice or spiritually enslave, that they take on those souls as well. That's why it's so prominent in music and stuff like that, because music is a form of hypnosis. And it's not the only way, but, one of the more prominent ways you see spells and rituals and stuff cast over the songs or the albums before they're released. And you notice like almost all artists will release on significant days, right? They'll be full moons, blood moons. They'll have significant numerical, attributes, astrological attributes. It usually correlates, something akin to them that's going to bring them more power. And then as you sing along, right, and the syncopated beats are proven, scientifically proven, to actually open us up in that way. That's why, when you listen to like hypnagogic dream state music and stuff, right, it's opening you up, creating, you're going into different brainwave states, and as you're listening to that music and you're repeating those lyrics, right, you don't know what you're actually repeating. You don't know what you're actually, speaking over yourself, because there are word spells and words have power. And 9 times out of 10, it's some form or another of you giving over energy or yourself, your soul, to the artist that you're listening to. And all of that energy that you give with your worship and idolizing these people as well, they're harnessing that energy, right? And that's the exchange, that's the exchange. When we X ourselves out and we say, hey, Jesus died on the cross for everyone's sins, but not for me, right? Jesus' blood covers sins and brings forgiveness, but not for me, right? Those type of things, right? You're blocking yourself out from that, and you're trying to accumulate something. You're gaining rank. The more people you can indoctrinate and bring into the darkness, the higher the rank. That's the whole name of the game. That's why celebrities and all that are immediately brought in. You know, once they reach a certain amount of influence and stature, it's because, you know, if I bring you in, then I get credit for you, right? So the more people I'm bringing in, you know, the more credit to me for corrupting more people, right? And the more people I'm reaching, the more people I've corrupted, right? But I can tell you this, no matter what you think, and a lot of people think if you sell your soul, you'll have riches and fame and, you know, and things will work out just amazing for you, right? Like, that's not how it works. The crazy part is whenever you make that deal, it's like you get everything in a very, very perverse way, you know, everything in a perverse way. You might say, and let's just hypothetically say you're like, I want to make $1 million, right? Well, lo and behold, you know, you've made that pact, you know, that contract. You start bringing the attention to, you know, to Satan and doing whatever you said you would do as part of your end. And all of a sudden, you know, you make $1 million the first year, right? Well, now that part of the bargain has been held up, right? Like, so that's the deal, you know. It doesn't mean you get to keep all of it. Matter of fact, what will probably end up happening after you've made that $1 million is someone will sue you for $10 million, right? Or your business will go under, or, you know, and that's, and a lot of people, quite frankly, ain't willing to pay the cost, you know, that it takes to continue down that road. And I can tell you, people think they will, or they think they want to, but in order to keep going, you have to keep giving, right? It's a pay as you play, right? Like, the selling your soul isn't enough, right? That's just to get into the door, you know? That's just to walk into the venue. It's just to get in there. It's just to be in league with Satan. That's not enough to get you to where you want to go. You know, it's going to take sacrifice. And usually the first sacrifice that you have to give is whoever you love the most. You know? And for a lot of people, that's our children, our mothers, our wife, you know, our best friend, you know. And it doesn't have a timeline on when it happens either. You know, a lot of people think they've scraped by and they didn't lose no one or whatever. And 6 months later, you know, the person passes. You know, tragic car accident, or, you know, they're unalived by somebody, or just, you know, some freak fucking accident. They get cancer. It's like, just, you know, because when you're making these pacts with demons, you know, and it's like, this is like the difference between a hex and, you know, other rituals. You're hexing yourself is what you're doing. You know, you're hexing yourself. You're cursing yourself in the worst possible way, right? You're giving yourself over to that. And as you give yourself over to that, you no longer have defense against anything, you know, none of it, right? Against spiritual attacks and all of that. You don't have any armor anymore to stop what's coming at you, you know. And it's extremely cutthroat. Everybody that's in that world is always trying to attack one another. It's a very, very evil world. I can tell you that for a fact. You know, there is no allies. Just because you guys both sold your soul, or just because you guys both, you know, worship Baphomet or whatever you're thinking, even if you're in the same coven, same cult, it matters not. You know, it's still every man for themselves, right? And everyone's always trying to take out one another. It's this, it's survival of the fittest, and that's why you see, You know, the elites, same thing, same principle. You see that infighting, you know, within politics and all of that. You know, people's like, oh, it's a giant show, you know, and it is in essence, right? It's like a giant show in some ways. But in other ways, you know, it's yes, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, right? So we have the same goal, so we'll agree and go along with the same agendas, right? We're wanting to get that same outcome, which is that one world order, right? Which we believe will bring in the utopia and all of that, you know. Which it sounds good. It makes a lot of sense if you really think about it, right? No borders to divide us, you know, everybody unified, you know. It sounds great. But when you realize who is sitting on the throne at the end, you know, a lot of people think it's going to be them, but it won't. You know, you no longer have individuality or a personality, because once you die, it will be absorbed by what you've given yourself over to. You know, the only way to eternally live is to be connected to God, right? Because that parasite, it consumes its host until there's nothing left. You know? And it consumes and consumes and consumes, you know, until you have nothing in your life left. And it pushes people to unalive themselves a lot of times because they realize what they've done. You know, they realize what they've done. It takes everything from you. It isolates you in a way you can't even fathom. You know? Once it's gotten its use out of you, you'll watch it all disappear. You know, financially, emotionally, you know, every bit of support you ever had. You know, because that's all open for attack. You know, and like I said, you're hexing or cursing yourself in such a way, you know, and the way that this works, let's say hypothetically that, you know, you agree, right? And you agree to make that sacrifice and give up that person. Well, you might say, oh, well, that person's a good person, so nothing's going to happen to them. It's not true. Whenever you hex someone, depending on how you do it, you know, and if you're, you know, regular rituals and magic, they have an expiration date, right? So if I participate in black magic and I send a spell at you, right? If you're in a state of grace when I send that spell, the demon is going to return. It's going to arrive. It's not going to be able to touch you because you're in a state of grace. And it's going to return back to where it came from empty-handed. But if I hex you, you know, meaning I've given something very powerful to that demon or that deity, something it wants, usually life of some sort. And like I said, the little ones in the bellies is the most powerful version of it. That's why you see such a big agenda for that in the world. You know, and they paint it up, and they always paint all this shit as something good, right? Like pro-choice, right? Let women choose, give women, you know, and it's always going to be dressed up like that. Same thing with like the feminism, you know, like it was to separate women from the role of being mothers, you know, it was to denigrate being a mom, to make you feel like that was worthless and not enough, you know, when it's the most important role we have in society, literally, is being a mother. You know, that's who raises our generations, you know, nurtures our generations. And they completely turned it into something worthless and ugly, because that's what it does with everything. All the darkness, all the evil, does that with everything. Same thing with masculinity, toxic masculinity. You know, because men being men, right? and wanting to be territorial and protectors and all of these things, you know. They made it ugly. They made it wrong. You know, that way we'll act against our own nature. You know, you're participating in the ritual that way, by the way. You become an accomplice. And that's the way what magic works the most powerful way, is when you participate. And that's usually the name of the game, or the object, is to get you to go along with it, to get you to accept it, right? Because when you do, like I said, you're an accomplice and under the rules, right? And because we have free will, I can't violate your free will, right? But I can get you to go along with things. Right? If you agree to something, and that's why you see all the symbolism, predictive programming, and all of that shit within the media and internet and all of it, it's to get you to accept it, right? It's to get you to buy in, you know, to believe. They repeat a lie over and over and over, it becomes a truth. You've now bought into the illusion. You've now bought into the lie. You've now accepted the false version of reality. You've now accepted the spell, you know? Because that's all spells are, is an illusion, right? It's something to deceive you spiritually in order to take something from you or put something on you. And like I said, when we hex somebody, you know, a regular spell isn't good enough, because, you know, when we send that demon at someone, if it arrives and the person is in a state of grace, it returns, right? It can't do anything. But when you hex and you offer up something very powerful, you know, blood magic usually, that demon will wait. That demon will wait, you know. It's like, and I can set the times, you know, like, you know, in the first scenario, you get a demon sent at you, and it's like send it at 2 o'clock on Monday, 6 o'clock on Wednesday, 8 o'clock on Friday, right? It comes each time, and, you know, the second time, you know, you're not in a state of grace, right? You literally, maybe you were fornicating or cheating on your wife or husband, or, you know, you were doing something shitty. You were drunk, right? But you were spiritually compromised. And when you're spiritually compromised, it allows the doors wide open. That demon's able to enter and influence your life, no matter what you believe. You can believe in Jesus all you want, but like, if you have violated your covenant with God by not being in a state of grace, you've allowed access, right? And let's say all 3 times you're in a state of grace when that demon was sent to you, you know, when it comes to a hex, it don't matter. It don't matter. The demon will wait. Instead of him coming back at 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock, right? You know, sending it 3 times, right? And once those 3 tries are gone, he's done, right? And he'll sit there. He'll sit there and he'll wait. And it doesn't matter if it takes you 6 months to fall out of grace, right? The moment that door creeps open, he's on your ass. You know, he's on your ass. And he's attached. See, that's what allows witchcraft, black magic to work, is sin, right? Is when we do something screwed up, it allows the entity it attaches to our sin. It attaches to our darkness, right? It attaches to our darkness. That's why when you see like initiations into cults and covens and things like that, and different forms and different rituals, it's always like orgies and all of this. It's attaching to that, right? That's what's allowing those demonic entities to attach, you know, through the orgies, through the denial of Christ, through, you know, whatever you're doing. Right? Whatever you're doing. And that's why a lot of times when people do, you know, ghost hunting, and I learned this firsthand years and years ago before I ever did any of the podcasting stuff. I ghost hunted, you know, and I learned it firsthand. I got a demonic attachment, and it was a miserable experience for quite a while. You know, but people aren't understanding that when they're opening themselves up spiritually and they're not in a state of grace, they're allowing, you know, these entities place. You know, and they feed off of certain things. There's different types of entities that feed off of different types of energy. You know, and some demons feed off of violence. You know, and you'll notice like the guy that beats his wife or whatever. That's a demonic entity that's feeding off of violence and anger. You know, he's plagued by that. Or a violent woman, she's plagued by that. You know, bringing physical harm to another person. A lot of demons are sexually transmitted, and I believe I did a video a few years back, but I learned this firsthand. I don't know how I want to say this. But put it this way, when I was first tempted into really, you know, the dark side of everything, that's how it started for me. I met someone that did practice, you know, the dark arts and was connected to cults and things like that. And it was greed, I guess. Greed. Desire. You know, those kind of things that corrupted me. You know, I seen it as an opportunity. You know, I was already into such dark shit and practicing such dark shit that I thought this was the next logical step. You know, this was the next logical step, was to go ahead and, you know, join the other team. And I thought this would take me to like some new level in life, or, you know, because like, I was stupid, foolish, you know. I was foolish. You see so many people, right? Celebrities and politicians and all of this, and they've all sold their souls, and they all belong to these secret societies and shit like that. And you think, well, they have done this and it's brought them so much wealth. And, you know, if you're poor and you've grown up without money and in poverty and, you know, in fucking crime and drug-ridden neighborhoods and shit like that, it's like you will do anything to escape that. You know, you would do anything to escape that. You just want to get out of that cycle. You want to get away from that shit. You know, and you'll give anything. You'll do anything. And it's that desperation, you know, instead of seeing who got you there, which was God. You know, if you have a natural talent or gift, you know, it comes from God. It's a God-given talent. It's called God-given for a reason, you know? And so often people forget exactly who brought them to the dance. You know, it's like God gave you that beautiful mind, or God gave you that athletic body, or God gave you your aesthetic beauty. God gave you all of these wonderful things about you that make you special, unique, and make you stand out amongst people. God gave you that. You know? And it's like understanding that is huge. You know, and I feel like in my mind, like honestly, I could literally feel God weeping. You know? Like it's weird, it's crazy, I know. It's weird. But it's like I could feel God weeping when I did it. You know? Like I feel like he cares about all of us so much. Like each and every person. Our whole lives. Everything in our lives. Like there is no mistakes or accidents or all of it. And it's all perfectly orchestrated. Not for you to suffer, but for your success. You know? For you to shine. You know, for you to be able to express that divine nature. You know, and it's like we miss it. We don't see it a lot of times. You know, we're too caught up in feeling sorry for ourselves and, you know, seeing all the bad around us and just all of that. You know, we miss it. We miss it. You know, and I don't even want to say someone lured me to the dark side or whatever. It's like I lured myself. You know, I lied to myself. I deceived myself. I thought, well, this is how I do it. You know, and I had a lot of pressure on me externally from those kind of people. You know, it's like I was sick of being threatened. I was sick of being harassed and targeted. I'm sick of being shadow banned. I was sick of being electronically tortured. I was just sick of all of it. I was sick of suffering. I was sick of struggling. I was sick of being poor. I was sick of, you know, being an addict. I was sick of all of it. You know? And I thought, this is how I get out. Yeah. And like I said, I could feel God weeping. I really could. Like it's heartbreaking. But and it's like the moment I made that choice and went ahead in that direction, and the moment I started participating in those kind of things and was in union with those kind of people, my entire world flipped upside down. Talking about going from bad to worse. And like I said, it's drip by drip sometimes. It's like so you don't notice it, you know, bit by bit, so you don't see it all at once. It's only when you look back in hindsight, or you know, after you feel it, or after it's too late, you know, after you're already drowning in it, then you're able to see, like, holy shit, what have I done? And there are spiritually transmitted diseases. There are demons that are transmitted through sex. And people that live that lifestyle, they are inhabited by those type of entities. I can promise you that. And you'll know it. You'll know it. You know, it's bad enough people being extremely promiscuous and sleeping with, you know, different people and cheating on their husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends. I mean, that's terrible. You know, it really is. It sucks. It's sad to see that. You know, sad to see people don't value their body, their energy, you know, and they will just bang somebody the first night they hang out with them, you know, first time they're with them, you know. They will break up and be with somebody new within days, weeks, you know. It's wild. It's wild. It's like they don't even allow themselves to heal from the last one before they're sleeping with another person. and they wonder why they're so fragmented and fucked up. You know, and it does it to all of us too, by the way. Like, the more partners we have, the more broken we become, especially women. Especially women. You know, because they take on that energy. They retain the DNA of the men, you know. So they're literally holding that within them. It's like they have, and they'll take on personalities of the male they're with sometimes. And it's like, you've had so many, you know, it's like, you know, you are extremely fragmented. Males too, we're giving our energy away, you know. We're giving it away, and when we do, we become depleted. You know, we become depleted. Loss of vitality, ambition, all of it. It's like, and it's instant. You know, once you've been in sexual union with a person that has that, you know, that demon transfers into you. You know, and sadly, they're one of the hardest ones to get rid of too. Like, almost impossible. You know, I had one literally plague me for years. For years. You know. And I had a dream beforehand warning me not to do it. And, you know, and I just did it anyways. You know, like lust. You know, when you get with the wrong person, your life will go to hell. You know, your life will go to hell. You're taking on that energy. You know, they say when you sleep with someone, you sleep with every person they've ever slept with. Well, not just that. You know, you're also taking on all of their sins, all of their flaws, their craziness, all of it. You're taking it all on. You're taking them on. You know, so it's like, make sure you're prepared for that, because I doubt you really are. How can we be? Especially most of us sleep with people we don't even barely know. You know, we don't truly know these people. We never took the time, a lot of times, to develop friendship, connection, any of that. We think, oh, well, I've known them for a few years. It's okay. You know, I used to go to school with them, or, you know, I talked to them for a week on dating site or whatever, right? Like, met them at a bar, whatever. Like, that's good enough. Seem nice enough. You know, we all seem nice enough when we want something. When we're trying to mate with another person. And it's like, we have to understand that everything in our lives is a reflection of what's inside of us. And I mean this wholeheartedly. Everything in our life is a reflection of what's inside of us. And, you know, and I can tell you this, recently when I really started deciding, like, I didn't want to participate in the dark shit no more. It's like I could feel everyone and everything around me that is connected to that start to reject me. You know, isolate me more. You know, because it makes you, you know, that's how you defeat someone. You know, even like in the wild, you know, it's like a hyena will, you know, try to isolate, you know, one gazelle, or a lion will, you know, get the slowest gazelle or whatever, you know, like, and they get them by themselves so they can kill them easy. You know, it's the same thing. You know, like, and when they target people, notice you know, they'll break all your relationships and all of that, you know, to isolate you, because you're easier to work on that way. You're easier to target that way. I recently got banned from TikTok after I eclipsed 10K. got banned there. Got 2 strikes on my my YouTube channel, my main channel. My Facebook channel with 25,000 got shadow banned so hard I barely get any views on that one now. It's like just one thing after another. My Patreon, like $100 in the negative because of a person that sued me. You know, just one thing after another. You know, girlfriend break up with you. You know, all of it. It's like one thing after another. And it's like the devil saying, you can't do this without me. You know. That's what it is. It's like the devil saying, you can't do this without me. I own you now. But the way I see it is like, you know, even if you have sold your soul or anything like that, it's not ours to sell, right? Like, we don't own it. You know, it belongs to God, technically. If it didn't, then he wouldn't have the right to judge it. If you think about it, you know, it wouldn't be able to, at the end of time, there wouldn't be the separation of the wheat from the tares, and, you know, there wouldn't be none of that if it wasn't his to judge. You know, think about it. Your kids, they belong to you. My kids belong to me. You know, even though they're at my mom's house right now, you know, they still are mine, right? I still have possession of them. And even though we're in his home at the moment, right? Satan's world, we still belong to him. You know, we still belong to God. And I can tell you this too, and this is, you know, like I said at the very beginning, you know, I started off a hardcore Christian fundamentalist. I really did. And obviously, the more I like dove into the new age shit, and the more I bought into all the conscious movement and all of this, you know, I fell for that trap of like, oh, well, you're just indoctrinated if you believe in Jesus. And you're just, you know. And then you start believing that, you know, you're a God, you know. And if you think about it, that's what Satan did, right? That's what Satan did. Satan was like, I'm God. There is no others apart from me, right? He was Yaldabaoth, who was placed on the fucking cloud, right? On the throne, hidden from all to see, right? In the ethers. You know, he was created by Pistis Sophia without permission of the Father, right? Meaning he was manifested into reality without permission of God. Same way he fell down into the flesh, right? And same way he came onto those women without permission, right? Creating, it's over and over again, right? You see this same thing. This same thing. And it's like we're mimicking him and we don't even know it. We're doing the same thing he's done and we don't even know it. We have no clue. It's like when we say, I'm God. That's what he said. You're not God. You're a child of God. You're a humble servant of God. Nothing more. And I can promise you that if you don't believe that, test the theory. Test the theory. I don't care how fucking positive you think you are, how much you believe you manifest your own reality and you have the power to create and all of this, you know, woo-woo bullshit, right? And how much you know, how much knowledge you have, and how divinely connected you believe you are, you know? Test God, right? And see. Fuck around and find out, is what I'm saying. You know? And quickly, you will be humbled. I can promise you that. Quickly. You know, you don't have the power to give life or death. You don't have the power to change anything. You know, you're in a shared collective reality. If you actually created your own reality, you'd be in your own individual, unique world where you called the shots. So when people say, I create my own reality, no, you create your own choices. You don't create your own reality. You make your own choices. You have free will, but that's the limit of what you do here. You know? You can influence your own individual life by the choices you make, and you will experience consequences for those choices, because for every action there was a reaction, you know. And you know, another method of witchcraft is to try to avoid those consequences, is to create a buffer between you and the consequences. You know, that's why a lot of times, you know, and that's why it's a giant pyramid scheme. You know, that pyramid scheme structure, that comes from cults and covens, right? Secret societies. That's where that shit comes from. You know, I initiate you, you're below me, you initiate someone else, they're below you, and so on and so on and so forth, right? It becomes a hierarchical structure, you know, and it creates a buffer, you know, between you and sin. Right? That way I can get you to do my dirty work for me, and I don't take the bad karma for it. Right? I'm not wearing the sin, you know, to open myself up for attack for the things that you do, even though it's my will. Right? But I'm over you so I can influence you or command you to do it. You know, and a lot of times that's how you know these things are done. You know, you think you're being brought into this inner world to where, you know, you're going to learn the mysteries that nobody else knows. And that's, you know, and think about it, that's the same bullshit that the pharaohs and all of that, right, believing that they were divine and that they were gods and all of that. It's the same shit today. You know, that secret knowledge, right? It's like it makes you feel like you're elite, you know, like you know something nobody else knows, you know. And when Christ was talking about having the eyes to see and the ears to hear, I'm sorry, he was not talking about those things at all, dude. You know, it was the eyes to see and the ears to hear the truth, right? To see things with clarity, to have actual discernment, you know, to be able to tell right from wrong, to be able to see, you know, the meaning and divinity within things, you know. You know, and think about like anybody that's ever truly, and some of the most powerful magicians in the entirety of the world, the history of the world, like John Dee, right? John Dee, okay? The one who discovered the Enochian language, or rediscovered the Enochian language, right? Anybody familiar with, you know, Enochian magic, the keys of Solomon, all of this, right? Then you know what I'm talking about here. Right? And Solomon as well, right? These are just examples of people that have bought in, you know, what happened to them. You know, John Dee was such a powerful magician and astrologer, right? Like he was literally able to, you know, help the Queen of England fucking win wars and shit through his magic, you know. You know, he had an advisor, and I believe it was the French. I want to say it was the French or the Dutch or something like that. They were coming to attack England, right? And he was, you know, through divination, he was able to divine, you know, what the plan was in war. He said, hey, you know, we're going to stay in here, right, at the harbor. We're not going to go out and fight, right? Lo and behold, a storm comes in and wipes out all the enemies, right? he had a partner that helped him, right? They tapped into some or other alternate reality or dimension and were speaking to angelic entities, right? And just because they're angels don't mean that they're good, by the way. You're just like humans. They're good and bad, right? There's fallen, and if they're down here participating with you, they're fallen, right? They're fallen. Because I hate to tell you, good doesn't disturb the free will of man, right? It doesn't infringe on free will. It's only demonic entities that are sitting there waiting, right, to have, to put their hands, their mitts in your life, right? When you're praying to the, the heavenly realm and the good, they work through people, right? It works in other ways, Like say you're in poverty and you're suffering and you're struggling and you need help, right? Like, and you pray to God, for finances, for blessings, for, help, the demonic is going to intervene in a different way, right? It's going to come straight to you, going to come straight to you and give you ideas and all of this on how to create wealth, right? Ways to make, to bend and twist things to make it work for you, to manipulate to make it work for you. Remember, Baal is the god of lies, right? But when you have the heavenly realm, they're going to work miracles through people, It's going to be somebody that, like somebody that their heart is moved to give and to help you, and you know what I mean, to show you love and show you kindness. Like, that's how it's going to happen. They're going to bless you. It's going to come through man. Or good things in your life are going to align in order to create positive opportunities, good opportunities, things that don't go against the nature of God. Anytime it goes against God's nature, right, and it goes against, scripture and stuff like that, it's not of God, right? Because God doesn't contradict himself ever, right? There is no contradiction. And it's like a lot of times we will try to bend and twist the Bible in order to make it fit, what we want, our will, our thoughts, our ideas, And the Bible says don't add or subtract, right, to these words. It's telling us don't do that, because it knows how we are, right? We're clever creatures, and that's what we do. And you can watch any fucking podcast, get on Spotify, YouTube, whatever, right? Whatever your platform of choice is, any podcast, and if they talk about spiritual stuff or consciousness or all of this, I guarantee you can have two different people with two opposing opinions, and both of those people are going to be able to take scriptures, right? And they could take the very same scripture, right, to support opposing beliefs and opposing opinions, because that's what men do, right? They'll twist it in order to fit their agenda or fit their ideology. Right? I don't know how many times people have taken scriptures, from the Bible in order to justify atrocities, the most screwed up things you can imagine, through the scripture. Right? Like, oh, well, the Bible says, Instead of taking it at like, face value and what its true meaning is, we try to bend it and twist it to our will, to what we want it to be. To excuse the things that we don't want to stop doing, usually. It's like somebody saying, well, God told me you're my soulmate, but they're married. No. God would never, ever, your soulmate is your husband, that's your soulmate, God would never, ever try to get you to break up your marriage to go to pursue another person. That's just not how it works. It's immoral and wrong, but yet people buy into this stuff, They use God as their excuse to justify the things that they do. Wars have been started. All types of things have been done in the name of God. And because of that, we attribute that to God. Think about Old Testament God, that the wrathful, vengeful, angry God. It's like, if you really think about a father, and I want you to really kind of dig into this one. If you really think about a father, right, who's protective over his children, a father, part of his attributes is to protect, right? And there are these tribes of Gibborim, Raphaim, Nephilim, right? And all these Aims at the end, right? The Nephilim, Raphaim, Gibborim, right? The men of old, the heroes of old, the men of renown, right? Gladiators, demigods, deities, sons of God, sons of Satan, all of the different things that we call them, giants, that these the Canaanites and all of this, and we can get into what all of that truly means. And Canaan was one of the first civilizations on earth, right? And canine derives from dog, right? And that's why we have canine teeth, right? That's the vampire teeth, the canines, right? That's when we started eating meat. That was Chrono-Magnus, right? That's those fangs, right? Those serpent fangs, those dog fangs, right? Remember, Anubis, the god-headed dog, right? The lord of the underworld, right? He's the one who would weigh the heart, right, against a feather. And if your heart was heavier than that, he took you to hell. It was not a good time if you've seen Anubis, But all of those different civilizations and communities in the Bible, Old Testament, that's who they were, the Canaanites and all that. So when you hear God saying, destroy all of them, don't take anything from them, don't take a single piece of gold, don't take none of their women, destroy every last one of them. It's because they were seeds of the serpent. That's why. It wasn't just because God's a piece of crap and he wanted to just murder and kill and maim and all of this. No, he was trying to rid the earth of that bloodline that is enslaving all of us, that satanic bloodline, that serpent bloodline that is still on the earth to this day, right? Wreaking havoc, destroying our world, stealing our rights and enslaving us, mind controlling us, and committing atrocities against, the innocents to this day. So when he was saying, hey, go wipe all them out, that's what he was talking about. Go back and look at all the different tribes and stuff, and I guarantee you'll see each and every one of them derive from some sort of version of that, So you can believe that or not, And a father would do that. He would protect. He would fight. He would war. He would go to war for his children, right? He would show no mercy on those that were destroying his children, that were raping and pillaging his children, that were enslaving his children. I would show no mercy. Harm my kids and see if I show you mercy. You won't be around to talk about it. And anyone connected to you participating in it will be gone as well. And that's the type of God we have, right? One that fights. He's not a softie, And if you think about the flood and all this, the destruction, and so many people are like, oh, well, he destroyed the earth, and why would he do that? It's like, the earth was so corrupt with that seed, right? That we were enslaved. We were enslaved. We were enslaved. They were far more advanced and technological. Like, we didn't stand a fighting chance against them. He had no other option but to wipe the earth clean, because he had to get rid of that seed. And here's the crazy part. And he told the fallen, he said, You think your sons will live for 500 years and da 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 da, but they won't. You know, he pitted them against each other. He used that own demonic dark nature against itself, right? So he didn't even have to kill none of them. He allowed them to be who they were, and because they're so cold-blooded, you know, and so evil and dark in nature, they just destroyed each other. They went to war against each other, destroyed themselves, you know. And then he left their spirits on the earth to roam, right? He didn't let them go to heaven. He didn't, you know, and he didn't let them go to hell with their dads either. You know, and because of that, they hate us. That's the demons that torment us. And those same spirits are the ones that whenever you're, you know, you're out of a state of grace, or that you're practicing witchcraft or any of these things, you're allowing in. That's them. That's who you're allowing in. That's the demonic entities. You know, that's who you're allowing in. Now imagine, you know, when people think that they can, and a lot of people do, all great occultists think that they can control demons, and you might be able to for a moment, right? If you know the sacred geometry, and you know that the original shapes of creation, because, you know, and I can tell you, I know all these things. I've studied it all. You know, I've taught a lot of this stuff to people. You know that with that triangle, you can trap any energy. You know, that's why the all-seeing eye is in a triangle. You know, it's one of the original states, those 3 points of connection, right? And then you put that circle around you, right, of protection. So you've got it in the black mirror inside the triangle while you're standing in the circle, and it's like, oh, I'm good, right? But the moment you forget to close that out correctly, the moment, you know, you do something out of a state of grace, the moment there is an opportunity, and there will be, because you're messing with an ancient art, an ancient form of necromancy, because you're contacting dead spirits is what you're doing, whether you think you are or not. These are dead spirits, right? Demons are degraded, dead Nephilim entities, right? They're dead. They're no longer connected to God. That's why they need to feed on energy in order to sustain themselves, right? To give them strength, because they're disconnected. Same way that a person, when they're disconnected from God, you know, same thing. And eventually you're gonna mess up. You know, and when you do, they're gonna be waiting. You know? And they hate the fact you have dominion over them. They hate it. You know? So the moment you give them place or dominion over you, they're going to take full advantage of it. And they're going to drain you for all you're worth before they sacrifice you. You know? And most people don't understand how demonic entities work, so they get scared or whatever, you know, and that fear just strengthens them. You know, you're caught in a loop with them. You know, it's like they're a mirror, you know, and you're just reflecting right back at you over and over and over and over. So the more fear you project, the more it goes and strengthens them, the scarier they get. The more fear you project, the more it goes into them, the scarier they get, because they're feeding off of your energy. You know, they're sucking the life right out of you. And they're using every open door spiritually, every mistake to get to dig deeper. To dig deeper, because they are parasites. You know, when the earth was destroyed by the flood, you got to think about it, man. This was like God wiping everything clean. And what happened? What happened? Some of them survived. And think about like the tales or the epics, you know, of the Hopi and the ant people and all of this. And remember, when God punished these fallen, what did he do? He removed the light from them and covered them in rocks. He made them go underground. That's what he did. He's like, you won't see the light of day again. You're covered in darkness and the rocks of the earth, right? So they literally went underground. And what did they do? They're like, hey, come on, Hopi, come on, you know, come with us, sky beings, us star people. We'll help you get to this, you know, and they wrote down all of the occult knowledge. That way they could perpetuate it back into humanity, you know, during the next chapter. You know, they could perpetuate it once again. And it's that same knowledge of those original 200 watchers that corrupted humanity way back in the beginning that we call the occult and the mysteries, right? And our gnosis today. You know, same thing today. There is literally nothing new under the sun. And that's why it says, as in the days of Noah, so it will be in the end, right? Because it's exactly like that. You know, the days of Noah, everybody was practicing witchcraft, sexual immorality, right? It was full of murder, adultery, all of it. It was just a, you know, it was a hellhole on earth. Look around you. Look around you. You know, divorce rates are higher than they've ever been. Marriage rates are lower than they've ever been. You know, look at the sexual promiscuity, homosexuality, all of it. Trans this, trans that, you know. Who is the god of the trans, by the way? It's Baphomet, right? He has both parts. You know? Both parts. That's your trans god. You know, and I once heard it put, and it was just one of the most mind-blowing, beautiful things I'd ever heard, actually. It said that even an atheist, you know, has chosen a side. They just don't realize who they're worshiping. You know? And that shit hit hard. I'm like, damn. You know, even if you don't believe, you've still chosen a side. You're still worshiping, you know, a god. You're just unaware of which one. You know? You're just unaware of which one. That's funny. Sorry, looking at the comments. But you're unaware of which one, you know. You know, and it's like, I'm not saying there aren't good people that are atheists, you know, and you can have a good heart all you want. You can be a decent person all you want. You know, but if you don't have that connection to source, you know, if you don't have that foundation, that moral compass as a foundation, I can tell you from firsthand experience, you're just lost. You know, I did things that I would never, ever do, you know, as a result of being lost. You know, just been a terrible human being. You know, things I'm just ashamed of, you know, as a result of that. You know, it's like you lose yourself. You know, when we allow, you know, greed and ambition and lust and all these different things to motivate us, you know, we lose ourselves every time. You know. And it's like, instead of like looking for, and what does it say? Like, what is it to gain the entire world and lose your soul? You know? And I know it's hard for people to like to see, like, you know, if you're in poverty and, you know, you have nothing, and you see, you know, somebody that's extremely wealthy and rich, and you're like, damn, you know, they have it all. You know, money does buy happiness. You know, it's like, I would gladly give my soul for that. You know, that way I can enjoy it in this lifetime and be happy in this lifetime and make the people in my life happy. You know? But then why is it so many celebrities off themselves? You know? Why is it so many people, once they hit a certain point, they either, they find God. If they're addicts, they find sobriety, like whatever it is, like they switch it up. Once they hit a certain point, because they see that there's no amount of money in the world, there's no amount of adoration and success and influence, none of it. None of what we put on a pedestal in our society that is going to make up for what it cost you to get that and attain that. And like I said, once you're useful, once you've outlived your usefulness, that's when you're gone, dude. Once they've squeezed the juice out of you spiritually, that's why you see all these, Illuminati sacrifices and shit like that. It's because they've squeezed the spiritual juice out of that shill or that dupe. There's nothing left to gain from that person, so they get rid of them. Either their influence starts declining, they're not, selling what they once was, there's something, right? Usually it's through direct communication with Satan, like that's how a lot of this works when they go into these rituals. And I've explained some of these in the past, and it's like, and I will do, a video, and I'll go in more depth, but I just wanted to try to touch the bases tonight, and I'll go into more depth, give you deeper testimony of how piece by piece, how it happened. But I've explained one of the rituals is, where they place you in a bath of ice, and they lower your body temperature, basically put you into hypothermia, right? Until you're clinically dead, and they have the high priest or standing there, and they cast your spirit down, and when you get down there, you're met with a demon or the chief himself, right? And you're given prophecies, or you're given names, or there's different states that you can be in to alter your consciousness, put yourself in certain trances, automatic writing, there's channeling, all of this is demonic activity, by the way. Anything, and that's whenever you see these people that claim to channel Pleiadians and all of this, it's like, I'm sorry, but the Bible specifically warns against Orion. All right, guys. Hey, my phone died, so yeah, my phone died. So I guess I'm gonna wrap this one up. I really wanted to, and tomorrow I'm gonna get more into this. I really got a lot to share with people as far as my testimony, just so many things pertaining to this. It's such a deep rabbit hole, and it's I've had so many crazy experiences as a result of this, and it's like I said, I think the only way I can really balance the scales at this point is to share what I know. So hopefully you guys can hear me and see me. But I am going to wrap this one up. I do want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me. Please consider donating and supporting. Like I said, I just got banned off of TikTok. Really just kind of been, and could definitely use the support. So if you'd like to donate to the channel, it's Best Damn Podcast, PayPal.me, Best Damn Podcast, Cash App, Best Damn Podcast, Facebook.com/Best Facebook.com John Keen Best Damn Podcast, and Patreon.com Best Damn Podcast Official. Hopefully we're not glitching out too hard here. But please like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure to click all on the notification bell. I'll post this over on Facebook, and like I said, tomorrow we will continue. I'm going to do a little series with this, and just really try to share all I can on this, man. And we're going to get into Jesus, and I've got some amazing stuff, really. Like, it's going to blow your mind when it comes to Jesus, and who he really is, and what I believe will really help some people. So like I said, I want to thank you guys, and I love you, and I'll see you soon. Peace.